And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is David Hancock. David is the founder of Morgan James Publishing and the chairman of Guerrilla Marketing International. He's co-authored 16 books, including Performance-Driven Thinking, The Best of Guerrilla Marketing, and The Entrepreneurial Author. Morgan James Publishing was ranked on the Publishers Weekly fast-growing small press list for 8 years. I can go on and on with his bio, but I'd rather just talk to David because he's sitting here right in front of me. So let's just chat away, David. So welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing absolutely incredible. How are you, kind sir?
I am good. So let's start with let's have some fun with some myth busting, because I spend a lot of my time talking to clients, and I don't obviously enjoy it. I mean, I do enjoy it, having to break open some myths about publishing. So the typical myth is client educated, intelligent, informed, incredibly successful in their domain is, I'm going to get an agent and they're going to go pitch it to a New York publisher and I'm going to get a big advance. And then all I have to do is write a great book. And that New York big publisher does everything. And I'm kind of I don't even know what everything is, but they do everything. And then I live happily ever after. So would you call that myth or what would you say? And if you heard that story as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I have. And I would call that multiple myths, because there's several points in that conversation that unfortunately are no longer the case. Now, that certainly could have been the case decades, heck, a century ago, but that's not the case today, especially today. And that's actually a good thing. Today, we as authors have more control and more flexibility and more ways to monetize our books than we had, decades ago. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but part of it is educating the experts and the authority in their space with what it really means now today and how to really leverage the fact that it is different in a good way.
Yeah, and I think in the problem, if you sort of zoom up a little bit here, is, hey, if I'm a publisher, right, I get paid by number of units sold, period, full stop. So Therefore, I want to sell a lot of books. As an author, it's not that I don't want to sell a lot of books, but in the grand scheme of life, with the exception of like 0.0002%, the book is either a marketing tool, it's in service of something else, but as a straight up revenue line, meaning, the royalties I get or the profit from my book is but a very small percentage of my overall income. I have other interests that the book helped me get entree to, et cetera. So I think inherently there's a conflict built into this lack of alignment, because an author might say, wow, that book was so successful. And then the publisher goes, well, how many units did you sell? And they say 2,000, but to the right people, right? And it led to this and led to this and led to this. And then the publisher's going, but yeah, I only got paid my $2 per 2,000. How would you work with that?
Yes, that's true. In fact, it's okay with us. We don't necessarily need to make all the money, but we do have to plan for it. So we've got to pick the right books to publish. But you're absolutely right. The reality is most of us as authors will earn far more income and opportunity because of the book than we will from the book sales. And as a publisher, you're right. The only way I make any money is by selling books. So it's a delicate balance. Mm-hmm. But the struggle is understanding that going into it, both publisher and author.
Well, and that's where you've got an interesting perspective, because you've been on both sides of that, right? So you could look at a potential client in the eye and say, listen, been there, done that 16 times. And let me tell you, and then, put your, I don't know if you have a separate author hat and publisher hat, or do you use the same hat? But,
the separate hats, but they're the same color.
Okay, good.
But that's absolutely right. So having gone through it myself, I realized the hard way, because nobody gave me that heads up. But I first started writing in the 90s. And boy, I tell you what, it exploded my business. It more than doubled my business as a banker when I wrote my first book. But, I was struggling to sell books. The publisher was yelling at me for not selling enough. And by my fourth book, I had sold 40,000 copies of that fourth book and still wasn't able to make the publisher happy. But man, I was killing it. Mm-hmm. So I think the problem was that the publisher was trying to find the next million bookseller on every single one of the authors, and that's not a realistic expectation. Or there are other publishers that will publish 13 to 15,000 titles a year, hoping that at least one or two will stick so they can afford to pay the bills, and the rest of the authors just get nothing. So
so that's sort of the Hollywood blockbuster model. If I do one Harry Potter, we could all live fat and happy for 10 years, and all the other things could break even. Let's do this. Tell me about what Dave, the publisher, is looking for in a client, in a book that you're going to publish. And then let's flip it and say, what should Dave, the author, be looking for?
Oh yeah, good point. So Dave, the publisher, is looking for somebody that's passionate and enthusiastic in their field and their topic. They don't necessarily have to be a writer, but they've got to have a good angle or a good story or a good way of doing something, and they want to teach others how to do it. And they really care about that reader doing whatever they're trying to teach. That's really important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But that passion and that enthusiasm has got to be the biggest thing. Because I've got to catch that passion and that enthusiasm and share it with our team just to get an acceptance in the first place. And we all have to get real passionate, enthusiastic with the author to share it with the sales reps and the bookstore buyers. And then together, we all, author and publisher, need to get enthusiastic and passionate about making sure that the consumer will run in and buy the book.
What
So
I would
us,
think is, as a publisher, if I don't come in there as an author on fire, passionate about it, you got to be raising an eyebrow going, well, if he can't get excited about it, how the heck can anybody else?
You would be surprised. Some of it might be nervous about talking to a New York house, and I try to give that to them, give a little bit of grace, but they really need to be, that really on fire person for their content, and they really need to believe that they are the right person saying the right thing at the right time and to the right people.
Cool. And then
I don't care about their platform as much as maybe some other publishers. I know that if they're coachable and they're willing to do the things that successful authors do, and they can hustle with us a little bit, there's a path that any of us authors can follow to build our platform to get to a point where, we're moving mountains, but it all begins with that passion.
And what would Dave, the author, be looking for in a publisher? Because I think oftentimes there's this perceived power imbalance where the author is like, oh, dear great publisher, please, please, please consider me. And I think it needs to be a relationship of equals.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, as an author, and this is why I started Morgan James in the first place. I wanted somebody that could, go down this path with me, that benefited with me, and maybe even shared some risk with me in the perfect world. But I needed somebody that could give me the credibility, the distribution, the opportunity that I figured a publishing house would happen or have. But I wanted them to stay out of my way. I mean, I was a thriving entrepreneur when I wrote my first books, but I had to get permission for everything. And I was limited to the number of copies of books I could buy for my own personal use. Every time I wanted to write an article or be interviewed, I had to make sure that I didn't give away too much content from the book or the publisher would yell at me. Even my talks, I had to get approved by my publisher just to make sure I wasn't giving away too much of the content from the book.
So a lot of constraints.
Really frustrating.
Yeah.
A lot of constraints, but no help. I never had anybody come to me and say, hey, all right, Dave, we want to help you sell books. Here's what other authors are doing. I just got yelled at for not selling enough books. And I learned that was typical publishing, and I didn't like it.
And why would they limit the number of books that you would buy? Wouldn't they say, listen, he's the author, he's the evangelist. He wants to buy 100 books a day. God bless. Let him. I don't care if he's giving them out for Christmas, right?
Right. So it's all about money and control. So most publishers do allow an author to buy a certain number of books at an author discount.
Yeah.
And usually it's 500 to 1,000. Maybe you can negotiate a little bit more, but very hard to negotiate more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can buy as many as you want at retail because they want to make all the money. And for me, man, I'm a guerrilla marketer. I recognize that, making sure that authors have affordable copies of their books so they can give them away or sell them as an income stream for them, but just getting the word out there helps sell units of books. And I never wanted to restrict them. So our authors can just buy as many copies as they want at a percentage above the print cost versus like a wholesale or even retail model. But, it's been proven to me over and over and over again. And I knew it going into it from my guerrilla marketing background, that the more that the author did, we could probably outdo them in the stores. In fact, we got a couple authors that are literally giving away 100,000 copies a year of their books.
Yeah, right.
But we're outselling that number into bookstores just because the conversation's being created. So we're encouraging as many authors as possible to give away as many books as they can.
There's probably some algorithm somewhere that says, for every copy an author gives away, we'll sell an additional 0.7 book. I don't know what the number is, but there's probably a direct correlation that you can map out and say, great, I'll give that book away at that author at some very, very small percentage over actual cost because I know I'm going to make it up in Amazon and other demand that they're going to generate.
Absolutely. And it grows. I mean, the more books that are out there in the field, whether it's from sales or author giveaways or even author sales, it can grow. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we do something really, really cool with our books. If anybody buys a Morgan James book, they can get the ebook edition for free. Because I want them talking about the book. I want them to have easy access to the content. I want them using it. And the more conversations that are out there around the book itself, no matter how it got into the reader's hands, can help sell books, which ultimately, is a part of the income stream from the author. But them being that authority in that space, that thought provider, is going to help them earn more money, charge more, and negotiate less, the way I look at it.
Yeah, build their brand. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. So I want to move for a moment to the business model, because again, this is an area where I spend a lot of time talking to clients, and for some reason, they're not as fluent, shall I say, in the business models, because there's vanity press, there's hybrid, there's traditional, right? And sometimes the lines are blurry even amongst those categories, broadly speaking. But
Right.
the business model ultimately needs to be, somebody has to pay for things, right? Books need to, trees need to be cut, paper needs to get, somebody needs to pay for that, right? Then it needs to be distributed. Retailers need to get paid, right? And then the author needs to get a royalty. So the old traditional publishing model was the publisher took the risk, they covered all the expenses. Author got a small royalty, whatever, 15% over a certain amount, they can negotiate more or less, whatever. So when you got an advance, that wasn't free money. That was a calculus against, we think this book will spin off X dollars. We'll give you some of that money today, right? And then after the book earns to a certain point, then you start to get a little bit more. People get obsessed with this advance, and as opposed to thinking about sort of the big picture of it. So could give us sort of publishing economics 101, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit it right on the nail there. The advance literally is what it sounds like. It's an advance payment against future royalties. And you have to be real careful, because especially first-time authors or non-savvy authors or non-savvy agents won't realize that there is a negotiation point there where a lot of publishing contracts, in fact, default for many of the large houses is if you don't earn that advance in book sales, you have to pay it back. So you got to be real careful.
A loan. That's a loan if I got to pay it back.
It's exactly a loan, because it is an advance against something future. But the advances aren't what they used to be. And they're just leveraging those advances to take over and do with it as they please, because publishers know everything. They know what is best.
Except for you.
But that's right. The reality is, it could be a moot point if the author is going to get out there and hustle and leverage the book in the first place. I'd rather pay a higher royalty and a smaller advance and make the author really realize that there's an opportunity to really leverage the power of the book to grow their business, and stop trying to sell an individual book to avoid paying the advance back, and start leveraging the content, because then you'll end up selling a whole lot more books.
Right. So when we talk about selling a lot more books, that assumes over a period of time, because I think the traditional publishing world thinks of a book as a seasonal item, like, oh, there's fall sweaters and summer blouses or something like that. But the reality is most books that do well do much better year 2 than year 1, and actually it's the long tail where the big money is. Can you touch on that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. And we still are following those sales seasons, just like the seasons of the year. But you're right. And unfortunately, a lot of publishers just don't have enough patience to let it ride through. The average traditionally published book only sells about 1,000 copies in its life before somebody gives up on it. And you bet your bottom dollar that it will happen sooner than the book was ready for. And I have seen countless examples, even some from a traditional aspect where, the publisher hung in there with the author. But I've seen countless examples where the book didn't take off till a year 2 to 3 to 5. In fact, one of our bestseller books, started taking off from 1,000 copies a year to 40,000 copies a year in their 7th year. It took a little bit of patience.
Wow.
But we hung it in there with them. But you're right. It takes time to grow into that.
Right. But the big house doesn't have the time, because they're in the spring, they're working on the spring, in the fall, they're working on the fall, rinse, lather, repeat. So the burden is on you, as the author, to make sure you get that tail, or work with a partner, work with a publisher that has that longer play. I mean, I know publishers love backlists that keep selling 1,000, 2,000 copies a month, 20 years later. That's heaven, right?
Yeah, but they don't do anything to make that happen.
Right. I won't tell.
That's what happens. Right. Well, and I've got friends in the industry, of course, as you can imagine, me being in the business so long, that, I've had conversations with major house publishers, sat down at lunch with them and said, okay, I share my plan, you share your plan. And we come to realize that, oh my gosh, we're both so unique. One publisher who will remain nameless, I love them and their concept and their brand, but they literally pay for placement into the bookstores. They'll print 2,500 copies of the book, put them out there in the Barnes and Noble shelves and others. And if it doesn't sell out in 3 weeks, they'll just take the book out of print and move on to the next author. 3 weeks for this author's life to turn around. And it's a hard task to do. Not many of them.
Well, and think about those 3 weeks. God forbid those 3 weeks, if you were the author that put your blood, sweat, and tears to it, and it was during, a bad news cycle or the beginning of COVID or a natural disaster or something that happened outside of that. It's the Super Bowl and nobody's paying attention, whatever. Like, that's not good.
Or you catch a cold.
No. Yeah, right. You catch a cold and you're in bed for a week of the 3.
That's right. One of my books came out about 6 years ago now. I had things happen in my life, health-wise, that prevented me from marketing it on time, and I didn't get a chance to really market my book for 5 years. Can you imagine? And it worked. I mean, I hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list 5 years after it, but if I had been with a quote-unquote regular publisher, they'd have given up on me a long time ago. So I'm glad I had patience for myself.
Yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on folks out there that are considering what to do with their either first book or next book? What are a couple, maybe a quick Dave checklist without being overly self-promotional? Obviously, the answer is Morgan James.
Well, it's always the best answer. No, really, you've got to find the right path. And I'm very passionate about helping authors find the right path. Self-publishing is absolutely better than doing nothing at all. So continue down a path of getting the book done, no matter how it takes. If you can get a relationship with a publisher that has the broader distribution, it can make a significant impact on your bottom dollar. But you need to make sure you find one that will let you do the things that you want to do, stay in control with as much as you can. Typically, we like to make decisions together with the author, recognizing their big picture is more important than our big picture. And really, when you look at it from a Zig Ziglar perspective, heck, even a guerrilla marketing perspective, the more successful the author is, the more successful the publisher is going to be. So an author really needs to pay attention to that and find out, where's that balance? How much can I give away, and how much can I keep, and how much will they let me do, and so forth. So that's the biggest thing. You have options, and options are good. Find the right path that gives you the blend of exactly what you need, and you should have a home run.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time, David. I appreciate your wisdom. And this is an episode you might want to listen to once or twice, because there's so much in here and so many mistakes that really, what shocks me is I just see so many smart people doing what in retrospect they will tell you is that was really dumb. And, they made the best informed decision they could at the time with the data that they had. And I think David's trying to give us a little more information so we can make a wiser choice here. So thank you so much, David.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Good talking to you. See ya.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.